Hello, everyone, and welcome to another X's and Dogs podcast. Well, if you would have asked me before this weekend's game against the Steelers, what is the worst possible outcome? What is the worst possible situation that the Browns could end up in at 4:15 p.m. on Sunday evening after the game? I would have told you three things need to happen in that situation. First and foremost, the Browns win the game, obviously negatively impacting their draft position heavily, very heavily. Secondly, Myles Garrett doesn't break the sack record. He isn't able to get the sack, the one sack he needs to break the record in the 16 games, so that way you can get rid of all the discussion surrounding the current record, being in 16 games only, and also having the ability to have more sacks than TJ Watt had in his 17 game season where he broke the record, and Myles was able to do it in 16 games, so it's just far and away better. And just kind of removing all of those discussions that we will likely have to have even if Myles Garrett does break the record next week against the Bengals. That one's not as key to me. Doesn't matter quite as much, but it is a pain in the behind. Thirdly, Shedeur Sanders doesn't do anything to make you more comfortable in saying that he can be the franchise quarterback going forward. And well, in Browns fashion, to nobody's surprise whatsoever, all three of those things did in fact occur in a manner in which the Browns can never seem to do the things to win a football game whenever you want them to. Here they go, beating the win and clinch the division Pittsburgh Steelers 13-6 in a pretty much meaningless football game on December 28th for the Cleveland Browns. I've said this before. I'm not the fan who will say the Browns should actively try and lose games. But I'm also not the fan that says every single game you need, it betters the team to win. I think that there comes a point in the season where winning football games truly isn't going to have much of an impact on the culture or, setting a standard for the players. And we are clearly at that point this year. We have a head coach in Kevin Stefanski who I think most people think is going to be fired in probably 8 days from now. And, we have 2 games left in the season where it's a 2 quarterback draft class more than likely. If we lose out, we have a top 2 pick and we'll have a great chance to get one of those quarterbacks. So all that said, this was a game where, we can appreciate the fact that the Browns won this football game today and beat our rivals in Pittsburgh. But the fact of the matter is this: if the Pittsburgh Steelers, who will play the Ravens at home next week, beat the Ravens and go on to the playoffs, you don't think the Steelers fans are going to be more than happy saying, we tanked the Browns' ability to go out there and get a quarterback by losing to them, then in turn beat the Ravens, won the division, and we're in the same spot we would have been in anyway. To me, that sounds like the worst case scenario. And I'm not sure if you guys will agree. I know there's going to be a portion of you guys who say, we need to win games, we beat our rival, and you don't subscribe to the tanking motto, and there's a line there, but I think once you hit the last 3 weeks of the season and it becomes truly meaningless to, setting a better culture. Like, you can't go into a season saying we're going to tank. That cannot be what happens. You can't even say we're tanking, I think, in October and most of November. But once you hit December, I think there comes a point where it's okay to do what the Raiders are doing or the Giants are doing and trying to lose games in order to better their chances on getting better draft capital for the future. But the Browns did what we always do and did the wrong thing. So I can't say that I'm very, excited and happy about this win today. I think there's a good chance Kevin Stefanski loses his job, and he kind of uses this as a middle finger to the Browns organization, in saying that screw your guys' high draft pick that's going to help you get a better coach in here to replace me. I'm going to do everything I can to win this game that doesn't mean anything, and screw you guys over because I'm going to be gone anyway. That part of it is another thing that is going to be just tough to take as a Browns fan. As we move on to prioritizing the draft, because that's where we're all going to be in 8 days anyway. I realize people want to root for the team in the moment, and we're still in the season, although we're very close to the end. But as soon as that last game is over, if you really care about the football team and you're a diehard fan, you immediately shift your attention to the draft. And we did some true damage to that part of our season today. And I want to shift the attention to talk about Shedeur Sanders. I guess first off, let's talk about, his game today, because I started the podcast today saying that I don't think Shedeur did anything more than he had already done to showcase that he can be a franchise quarterback. So if we look at the numbers, he went 17 of 23, just over 70% completion, 186 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, 75.6 rating on ESPN here. We'll see what the PFF grades are. We'll see what the tape says. I thought, honestly, this was definitely Shedeur's probably his second best game. I think he was better in this game even than he was against the Raiders, although he had more yards in that one. He made way better throws in this game, all of which in the first half. But even being his second best game, you look at the numbers and you look at the 13 points scored, and it just isn't enough to say that we can make this guy our franchise quarterback going forward. Now, the reality of the situation is we'll sit here on December 28th, likely having outside a top 5 draft pick. That's not even considering that the Bengals may not play Joe Burrow next weekend, and we'll have a chance to win that game too, and even further screw ourselves over. We're going to sit here with an outside the top 5 draft pick and no real chance to get a quarterback in this draft that anybody believes could be the franchise quarterback. And that's a tough spot to be in. That's a tough reality to accept, but it's where we're at. And here on this show, I'm going to have to shift my focus to how can we be the best team we can be with Shedeur Sanders at the helm? Is that going out and getting a veteran quarterback to compete with him? Malik Willis is a good option. Jacoby Brissett maybe. Mac Jones maybe interests some of you. Who knows? Do we do that? Which I think we definitely will need to do. But whatever needs to happen, that's what we're going to talk about from this point forward, because the reality of the situation is, without giving up more than I think it is truly worth it to go up and get one of these quarterbacks in the 2026 draft, we're just not going to have the chance to get one. So that's kind of where my mindset is at on the Shedeur situation. Breaking down his game further today, because it is a post-game show, I thought he was really good in the first half. I thought that was his best half of football. Yes, he did have the interception. I'm not going to put that one on Shedeur entirely, because first and foremost, if you watched the replay, I believe it was Sal Cannella was open on the route. He was open for an out route. Shedeur tried to throw it to him. He kind of got hit a little bit, and also the ball just flew directly into I'm not sure which line, one of either I believe it was an offensive lineman for the Browns. I'm not sure who it was, but hit his helmet and just bounced straight in the air. Could it have bounced straight down and hit the ground and not been an interception? Yes, but of course it didn't. And that kind of, alludes to some of the turnover luck that Shedeur's had this season. Of his nine interceptions, I really think 3 or 4 of them could have just as easily been incomplete passes, or obviously to that, for that Jerry Jeudy one in the Bears game, that could have been a touchdown. There's been a few throws he's made that resulted in interceptions that truly, don't warrant an interception. But also there's been throws he's made where it was pretty ugly. And that leads me right into the second half. Although the first half was great, he was, I thought there was a balance of taking what was there for him, which he did a ton of in that Bills game. I thought he over-relied on kind of checking the ball down to kind of the last resort options and not keeping his eyes downfield at times. Today, I thought he had that perfect balance of checking the ball down when he needed to, but also hitting those deep throws, taking the shots when they're there, in the first half particularly. So that's why I say it was his best half as a Brown. I thought he built on that Bills game where he played in structure, and he was able to play in structure today too, but also take the shots, i.e. that Harold Fannin throw, which was it the most beautiful spiral in the world? No, but it ended up a touchdown. And he saw one-on-one coverage with his favorite option, and he took it, and it resulted in a touchdown. So I'm not going to bash him for that. But the first half was efficient. The offense looked efficient, looked effective. The second half was the complete opposite. And during the game, I made a tweet saying, one of the things I've noticed so far this season that I haven't heard talked about a lot in Cleveland media in general is the fact that Shedeur, the discrepancy in first half to second half for Shedeur Sanders has been so dramatic that I think there's something there with maybe he's not, maybe teams are making adjustments and Shedeur's just not able to make the adjustments mid-game that he needs to continue to be as effective in these football games. But whatever the case may be, I believe there's something going on there with Shedeur that is, hindering his ability to continue to play as effective in the second half as he's been in the first half of these games. And the stats are there to back that up. I think I'm planning on making some sort of post either on Twitter or, maybe in a podcast for you guys about the discrepancy there and kind of showcasing that in a more obvious way. So more to come with that. But that's something I've noted, and it showed up in a big way today. He was really bad in the second half of this one. I thought he made some good decisions. He was heated up a ton. The offensive line did not play well in the second half at all. I thought in the first half they were actually pretty good. The second half, he was getting pressured, pretty much every time he dropped back, although he was holding on to the ball a lot like he tends to do whenever he does face pressure. He wasn't able to find any options downfield. He made that horrific throw across the field, and that's one of those plays where you watch it and you just think, what is this guy thinking? Like, this is the NFL. Maybe that play works in college. I find it hard to believe that pass would have been completed in college. I think he was throwing to Jerry Jeudy, and Jeudy was open for about half a second. But then you quickly see Jalen Ramsey is right there and has the ability to, close that gap quicker than most people in the NFL. And he just goes over there and does that. So, it was a terrible throw. It's one of those throws that you just simply cannot make at this level. And it's one of those throws that if you do put those on tape frequently, you are going to lose your job very quickly. We haven't seen a throw like that from Shedeur, in my opinion, really at all this season up until this moment. I thought he's made some questionable throws, but that was the one where it's like, okay, man, that's just a backbreaker. And as someone who wanted the team to actually lose this game, I was thinking, okay, that's going to be the moment where the Steelers, pounce on the opportunity, go down there, score a touchdown, and win this game. But of course, the defense, who I'm going to give the defense, their credit here in a second, was very stout and did not allow the Steelers to score another point in the second half. In general, the Steelers scored 0 points. So while the Steelers were not able to capitalize on Shedeur's very, below average second half, it was not good. It was not it wasn't a good process for Shedeur. And we'll have to look at the tape, in general to see, was there just nothing there? Did the Steelers figure something out with the offense that was pretty effective in the first half? Who knows? We'll figure that all out later on in the week, but clearly some sort of correlation going on with the first and second half in the drop-off in play for Shedeur. And for a guy who we're going to need, more than likely going to need to be playing quarterback for us next year, he needs to figure that out, because you cannot have that big of a discrepancy from first to second half if you want to be competitive in the NFL. You need to play a good first half and you need to play a good second half. There's going to be games where you play a good first half and you need to play a good second half. There's going to be games where you need to play, a good first half, because the second half isn't going to be as good. It can't be the same thing every time. And hopefully he's able to figure that out. Hopefully a new coach, a new offensive scheme can help with that. It kind of does correlate to what we've seen from Kevin for the better part of his career here, where early on in these games, the offense is way better than later in the games. So I'm not super surprised to see this being something that's occurring. And I'm not ready to say that that's solely Shedeur's fault, but he's playing a role in it for sure, with throws like he made, late in that game to potentially give the Steelers the ability to win it, although they weren't able to capitalize. Apart from Shedeur offensively, Harold Fannin continues to be fantastic. I think he kind of retweaked that groin injury that he popped up with on Friday. So just let him sit against the Bengals, in my opinion. Last thing we need is a more serious groin injury for that guy. Haven't heard the press conference or post-game press conference stuff yet, so I'm not really 100% sure what happened with him. But I don't believe he was out there at all in the second half after that injury, and that probably also played a role in the offense being really bad, because Harold Fannin is literally our entire offense. The guy is a freak athlete. I mean, he's always open, and Shedeur's always looking for him. He catches pretty much everything. He had a little bit of a drop issue earlier on in the season. It seems like he's completely figured that out, because he's catching everything right now. And he's scoring a lot of touchdowns. Obviously, one of the bright spots of the season is Harold Fannin. And although he didn't play much today, he was very good in the time he was there. Was able to get in the end zone on that, long pass from Shedeur. So, apart from Shedeur and Harold Fannin, there's not really much to talk about with the offense. I thought the running backs weren't particularly good in this one. In the first half, at times, they were running it effectively, but for the most part, it wasn't all that effective in the run game. I'm not 100% sure how much they ran the ball for in total. I think it was like under 80 yards for probably a few yards per carry. Nothing good there, which we know the running game isn't very good, so I'm not surprised about that one. Offensive line was okay, apart from Cam Robinson. He was horrendous in this game, as he most of the time is. Multiple flags, I thought, got beat really bad on that interception that Shedeur did throw off the helmet. Overall, was a bad game for Cam Robinson, but the offensive line, I thought, was pretty good for a patchwork offensive line. Apart from that, a lot of people want to point to the offensive line consistently and blame them for the pressures that Shedeur is facing, when a lot of times he's just holding on to the ball too long. And we'll see that more in all 22, but offense was okay. I'd give them a C minus. It kind of in line with Shedeur. Maybe I'd give Shedeur a C plus in this one, just because he was really good in the first half, and they did win the game. So, beating the Steelers is something that is not a lot of Browns quarterbacks have been able to do over the years. So, doing so is I think he deserves a C plus for this one. Now defensively, they were fantastic. The defensive line was really good, stopping the Steelers' run for the most part. I thought the Steelers' game plan today was horrible. Like Arthur Smith, that was terrible. Like the only thing he really cared about in this game was not allowing Myles Garrett to get a sack. They weren't even able to throw the ball down the field not even because Myles Garrett was threatening sacks, just simply because their game plan was to throw the ball so quick that he didn't even have a chance to get a sack. And I thought that really was detrimental to the Steelers in this one, and doesn't make a lot of sense to me for a team who needed to win this game to clinch a division win. It didn't make a lot of sense. I thought, honestly, while the defense was good for the Browns, the 6 points was almost more of a reflection of a terrible game plan by the Steelers than anything crazy that the Browns did, because at times the Steelers were able to move the ball, but there would just come a point in their drives where it would stall out because they would throw the ball in half a second, and all it took was one run play where they got 1 or 2 yards, and they weren't able to make up for that because they weren't throwing the ball down the field at all. So it was a little bit of a weird game whenever you're looking at it for, in the lens of the Browns defense, but ultimately they held the Steelers to 6 points. So a fantastic game for them. I'd give them a solid A, another A performance for the defense. They had a few bad weeks in a row, I think, but played really well in the second half against the Bills, played really well all game today. So got to give them their credit. Hopefully we can maintain a really strong defense going into next season, because I think, we'll probably need it. The offense probably will still not be where it needs to be. So, going into specific players, I thought Schlesinger should have just come out of the game. The guy's tough as nails, though, and I love seeing a competitor go out there and refuse to come off the field regardless, of if he's banged up. But I just thought that in this game, there was no point to go out there and risk yourself getting a worse injury, when also he was a little bit of a liability at times. Tony Romo was barking on that at numerous points this game, saying that, Schlesinger is just not the guy that when healthy he is today, because of kind of he had, I believe, a sprained ankle in this one, also had, or maybe it was a quad, something on the leg was bothering him all game, so I thought maybe the defense would have benefit from him coming out, but I love seeing the guy go out there and wanting to play, because we don't get enough of that as Browns fans, just true competitors who want to play the game and love playing the game. So apart from Schlesinger, I thought Mason Graham was pretty good. Another one of those games where he doesn't really get much on the stat sheet, but the Steelers weren't running it super effectively, so you got to imagine that he played decently. Myles was, it's tough to say anything about Myles' performance because, like I said, there was no chance for him to get a sack in this game. He had maybe 2 or 3 plays where if he got past the double or triple team, he would have been able to get to Aaron Rodgers. But there's no chance of doing that whenever Aaron Rodgers is throwing the ball in 1.5 seconds. So, excuse me, even for the best pass rusher in the league, you can make it incredibly difficult for him to get a sack if you're willing to cost your offense. And that's what happened. Arthur Smith and Mike Tomlin were willing to cost the offense significantly in this game just for Myles Garrett to not break the sack record today. And they'll never admit that, but I will believe that. I will believe that always, because I know damn well the Steelers can run a better offense than they ran today. But I guess it helped the Browns get a win. You know, we all have our opinions on that. I tend to think that they shouldn't have won this game, of course. But, you know, there's going to be a section of you fans who are excited that the Browns won today because it takes them out of real consideration for one of the quarterbacks in this draft. And I would combat that with, we are at real risk now of losing out on the top wide receiver and top offensive lineman in this draft. So all I hear from Shedeur fans is the offensive line is trash and the wide receivers are trash. Well, not only, like, I know you guys want Shedeur to be the quarterback and you want the Browns to pass on the quarterback, but not only did we damage our odds at getting the quarterback and almost erase them entirely, we also significantly hurt our chances at getting the best available talent at offensive line or wide receiver. So I think for both parties there, this win it was just damaging and seems rather meaningless in the grand scheme of things. So, you know, throughout the week, we'll kind of, you know, as I let the information soak in and get a better idea of where in particular the Browns are going to likely be picking now, I'll obviously have probably another mock draft out this week since this really changes things up. But I also will talk about, you know, what to do with the other the quarterbacks in the quarterback room, because you're going to need more than Shedeur Sanders. You know, how to address the offensive line if you're not able to get, you know, that top tackle, or the wide receiver room if you're not able to get that top wide receiver. So we'll get into all those things. So stay tuned for it. If you guys did enjoy today, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. There's a lot of you guys watching on YouTube who are not subscribed, so, you know, I'm not going to demand it, but it would be greatly appreciated for you to, you know, hit the subscribe button if you are enjoying. Hit the follow button on whatever platform you do watch on if you're tuning in for podcast format. You know, working hard for you guys to get Browns content out on, you know, a multiple times a week basis. Struggling through a really bad Browns season and now very damaged draft capital. So we still got to continue to push forward, though. The Browns will play next year. We have a whole offseason to get through, and I'll be right here with you guys through it all. So, you know, tell your friends if you enjoy. And I will see you all very soon. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.